I'm a transgender woman. In the moments since I said that, your brain did something remarkable. It reached for a category, and that category came preloaded with assumptions, with reactions, with a whole story about who I am before I'd said anything else. That's not a character flaw. That's how your brain works. But here's the question most people don't stop to ask. What happens after the category arrives? Let's start with something important. Categorizing people isn't automatically bad. Our brains categorize everything: teacher, mechanic, Christian, atheist, conservative, liberal. Those categories help us navigate a complicated world. If we had to analyze every single thing from scratch every day, we'd never get anything done. The problem isn't that categories exist. The problem starts when the category becomes the whole story. Because once a category replaces a person, we have stopped learning. And once you notice it, the argument starts to look very different. So, if categories are just how brains work, what's the actual moment they stop being useful and start doing damage? Let's try a few examples. I say, I'm a conservative. Immediately, pictures appear in your mind: a certain personality, certain beliefs, certain opinions. Now, I say I'm a liberal, a completely different set of assumptions. Same person behind the words, different label, different world. Or I'm an immigrant. Again, assumptions arrive. Some positive, some negative, some accurate, many not. But here's what's interesting. The point isn't whether those assumptions are right or wrong. The point is how quickly they appear and how hard they are to shake. Social psychologists have studied this for decades. Implicit association tests show that our brains link categories to traits faster than conscious thought can intervene. Not because we're bad people, because pattern matching is what brains do. But this is a very specific kind of reasoning. It treats the label as the whole person without admitting that it's doing that. Here's where it gets more interesting. If labels shape what we think about someone, do they also shape whether we actually hear what they say? Now, let's take it further. Categories don't just affect what we think about people, they affect how we hear them. Imagine two people making the exact same argument. One is introduced as a scientist, the other is introduced as a politician. Suddenly, people react differently, not because the argument changed, because the category changed. The label becomes a filter. And once that filter is in place, we stop evaluating the message itself. We're no longer listening to what's being said. We're listening to who's saying it. Because how something is framed can and does change how it feels. And here's where it gets worse. Because once the filter is in place, your brain has a shortcut to stop thinking altogether. This is where thought stopping cliches enter the picture. You've probably heard them before. Of course, they'd say that. Well, they're biased. That's just what those people think. Notice what's happening. We're not examining the idea anymore. We're dismissing it based solely on who said it. The category becomes a substitute for an analysis. And once that happens, curiosity disappears. Not because the argument was bad, not because the evidence was weak, but because the label arrived before the listening did. These cliches are powerful because they feel like thinking. They feel like a conclusion, but they're actually the opposite. They're the moment thinking stops. And once you notice it, you can change how the argument looks. So, what do we do about it? If categories are automatic and filters are unconscious, and these shortcuts feel like reasoning, is there any way out? At the beginning of this video, I told you I am a transgender woman. Maybe that changed how you saw me. Maybe it didn't. But whether we're talking about trans people, immigrants, religious groups, political groups, or anyone else, the lesson is the same. People are always more complicated than the categories we put them in. Categories can be useful, assumptions can be unavoidable. But if we want to understand each other better, we have to be willing to look beyond the label before deciding what someone believes, before deciding whether they're right or wrong. Listen to what they're actually saying. Because the moment a category replaces a person, we stop learning. And the moment we stop learning, we stop listening. Y'all be well, and I'll see you in the next one.